Okay, we are going to start now. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. Good morning. Thank you for joining us today for this session on best practices and opportunities for ESCOs in ASEAN countries. My name is Rosa Garcia. I am Energy Efficiency Specialist at Escrow, and I will be the host for this session. First of all, I would like to thank our speakers, panelists, and representatives from the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, the ASEAN Center for Energy, and the Global Esco Network for participating in the organization of this event that we hope opens new doors for energy efficiency in the region. We are delighted to have Dr. Nuki Agia Utama, Executive Director of ACE, in a pre-recorded video for the opening remarks. So thank you all panelists, speakers, and attendees today. And I wish you a very interesting and useful session. So please can go for the video.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of ASEAN Center for Energy, I would like to express my appreciation and convey my gratitude to all the participants for spending your valuable time in participating in this webinar of best practices for scaling energy efficiency with ESCOs, opportunities for ASEAN. We would also like to thank our partner, Sustainable Energy for All, for their cooperation in organizing today's webinar and continued support in the energy sector's development in the region. Ladies and gentlemen, the robust economic growth and rapid urbanization has increased the energy demand significantly in ASEAN. As one of the largest economic coalition, the region currently accounts for the 4% of the world's final electricity consumption share, and the electricity demand is growing at a rate of 6% per annum. The region is also expected to have 60% energy demand growth by 2040, even with reflecting COVID-19 impacts and structural economic shift towards lower energy intensity. With the challenges in meeting the increased energy demand and to maintain the sustainable growth that is responsible to the environment and social welfare, it is clear that energy efficiency is not only integral to the sustainable growth in the region, it is indeed also imperative for affordable energy use, competitive industries, appropriate usage of the region's finite energy resources, energy security issues, and also creating sustainable economy and job opportunities. Ladies and gentlemen, under the Bandar Seri Begawan Joint Declaration on Energy Security and Energy Transition, adopted by the 39 ASEAN Ministers on Energy meeting, ASEAN declared to intensify efforts on long-term energy and climate policy and planning to increase the rate of energy efficiency and conservation, expand RE source, and also deploy advanced, cleaner, and low-carbon energy technologies towards low greenhouse gas emission and climate resilient development. Today, we will look on the role of energy service companies, ESCO model, in the region for mobilizing finance and investment for energy efficiency and conservation projects. Participation of ESCOs is increasingly important as it can play a central role in supporting a range of technical and financial solutions for energy supply services. For instance, to provide access to financing, reducing the cost of the project cycle across capital and operational budget. It also has played a fundamental role in shifting the status quo on energy efficiency uptakes in energy supply and end use. Providing an enabling environment and market to ESCO remains one of the key challenges in ASEAN and globally towards higher participation and development of ESCO. Although some of the member states have supported a number of policy initiatives to foster the ESCOs industry, but in general, the development is still in early stage and needs a lot of support to get off the ground. Therefore, through this webinar, I hope all attendees will get to perceive the latest knowledge and practices on ESCO market development globally. Ladies and gentlemen, our webinar today will highlight the trends, challenges, best practices, and successful ESCO models in developed and also developing countries, which I hope it can inspire ASEAN member states to promote and deploy ESCOs We are pleased to have a number of experts and stakeholders to share their experiences and insight on various practices in removing ESCO market barriers across region, China, and Japan. Additionally, we will have discussion session with the ASEAN Development Bank and also International Energy Agency on suitable measures and pathways for ASEAN to enhance the role of ESCOs and its market. Therefore, we would like to encourage all participants to be active in the discussion session. Lastly, we wish you all a fruitful sharing session today in this webinar. Please stay safe and healthy. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
We would like to thank Dr. Aguia and ACE for this insightful message that raises the important role of energy efficiency in the region. Now, before moving on, I would like to invite you to send your questions using the chat at any time. We will make our best efforts to answer them during this webinar. Now, our first speaker is Alexander Ablasa. He will talk about how ESCO market barriers can be removed and how to close energy efficiency capital flow. Mr. Ablasa has dedicated the last 2 decades of his career to scaling up energy efficiency and clean energy technology in 14 Asian markets. Across Asia and the Middle East, he currently provides energy efficiency expertise with the objective of scaling up energy efficiency capital flows through finance, investment structures, and policy reform. He is founding convener and co-chair of the Asia-Pacific Esco Industry Alliance, co-founder of the Global Esco Network, and he currently leads the Philippine Energy Efficiency Alliance. Alexander, we look forward to hearing from you. The floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Rosa, and it's a sheer delight to be in this webinar hosted by the Sustainable Energy for All and, of course, the ASEAN Center of on Energy, with the support, of course, of the Global Esco Network and the Asia Pacific Esco Industry Alliance, which I represent. So it's very good that we have another ASEAN event. We have another event in the region that's talking about energy efficiency and talking about ESCOs as a means to flow capital. It's yeah, let me just get my slides up. So I'm starting to see close to $1 trillion capital gap for the Southeast Asian region between now and 2040. And much of that gap could be bridged if we are able to remove the barriers to the ESCO market across the region. I'd like to make that pronouncement, something I've used always in the last 3 years. Before it was still sub $30 billion. Now we have a $33 billion ESCO market. And I'd like to say that of the $33 billion ESCO market size, 60% of that is situated in Asia. And so this is a very interesting opportunity that the ESCO business model has made a strong comeback in this part of the world. And it will be very interesting to see how that could be grown as well in Southeast Asia and balance the dominance of the ESCO business model in China. The Asia Pacific ESCO Industry Alliance now embraces 10 country ESCO associations. And we've been meeting in the sidelines of both the Asia Clean Energy Forum, the Asian Development Bank, and the Asia Clean Energy Summit, hosted every 4th quarter of the year in Singapore. So we've been meeting in the last 3 years, and we now have the ESCO associations of China, India, Indonesia, Japan, Korea, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, Taiwan, and Thailand. And what this regional platform is supposed to be supporting is initially knowledge flow, so exchange of knowledge, exchange of ESCO sector capacity, exchange of maybe at some point transactional and flowing capital guarantees in other financial services across borders. It will also is intended to enable carbon market transactions, ease technology deployments, facilitate investments, facilitate business development, and flow know-how, capacities, knowledge, and capital from more developed ESCO markets to the more nascent ESCO markets. And we expect, the Asia Pacific ESCO Industry Alliance, or APIA for short, to grow and embrace other ESCO associations within Southeast Asia as they evolve. I did mention a capital gap in my opening statement, but I'd like to drill down and say that based on IEA estimates, they did in their market report, the energy efficiency market report a couple of years back. We're starting to look at that Southeast Asia may be requiring something like $892 billion of energy efficiency investments through 2040 to meet sustainability goals. And this is a huge figure, largely still in the commercial, industrial, and public use. IEA has actually prepared two projections. One is what they call the stated policy scenario, and this is it accounts for the current policy frameworks, and the sustainable development scenario, which is actually being replaced now with the net zero energy scenario, assumes that policies will evolve to meet target energy efficiency outcomes. But regardless of scenarios, it's still a significant volume, and this might be understated, that close to $1 trillion will have to flow from public sector, from private sector investments, and from development and climate funds to make sure that energy efficiency as a separate asset class is able to catch up with the velocity of capital flows already flowing through renewables. So energy efficiency is something that's largely government driven, but we need more private capital flowing through more innovative financing modalities. And ESCOs is just one of them. ESCO performance contract is just one of those modalities that will ensure that it contributes to this capital gap that we have to bridge in the next 2 decades. I did mention that of the $892 billion or $900 billion in the capital flows, business as usual modalities would be able to cover a third of that, or roughly $300 billion through the self-finance, debt finance, lease finance, and other on-balance. When we hear of markets flowing capital through financial institutions, through commercial banks, through government banks, that's a good growth strategy. It primes the pump. But when markets are now faced with the need to scale up, like towards their Paris climate obligations or towards the net zero energy scenario, then it's the on-balance sheet or debt finance is very, very limiting. And markets should strengthen or establish the off-balance sheet financing modalities. And this would include ESCO performance contracts, public-private partnership transactions, large-scale government retrofit programs, and other off-balance sheet modalities like joint ventures between private entities and state-owned enterprises or government-owned and controlled corporations. So we need to be more creative. The 0.9 trillion capital gap, it's not necessarily a money supply problem, but it's a plumbing problem. Money is flowing at a much better velocity towards grid-tied renewables because project finance works. But project finance, unfortunately, does not work for many ESCO-sized deals. And we need more creative plumbing to make sure that money flows from climate funds and from government funds and private sector portfolio investors into a portfolio of ESCO contracts. I list here the major policy, marketing, and financing barriers that are still impeding energy efficiency and ESCO capital flows in Southeast Asia. Now, some of these barriers have already been knocked down or largely removed in some markets, but in other markets, they continue to exist and be a reason why there's a lot of inertia in their energy efficiency market transformation. Number one, MSMEs and ESCOs have very limited access to EE debt finance. Now, I've seen this again and again and again when governments are trying to push capital flows through debt finance. ESCOs, the few ESCOs that may be creditworthy enough to borrow, typically max out their credit limits in after 3 project loans or 4 project loans, and they have to wait for their 10-year money to flow back to their treasury before they are able to borrow again. EE consumption thresholds for EE obligations are just too high. We need to review many energy efficiency and energy conservation laws in the region. In Singapore, it's still pegged at 54 terajoules. In Indonesia, there are attempts to reduce the consumption threshold from 6,000 tons of oil equivalent to 4,000 tons of oil equivalent under an amended law. But the numbers are still huge. We need consumption thresholds that would be more inclusive, that will capture more SMEs, that will capture large, medium-sized energy end users, and not just the very large industrial or very large commercial end users meeting the consumption threshold. Most of the markets in ASEAN have a delayed phase out of energy subsidies. There are only 2 markets in the region that have successfully removed or effectively removed most of the subsidies, and that's Singapore and the Philippines. But the rest of the countries are still in the process of phasing out. Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam. Most of them are still in the process of phasing out energy subsidies, which are affecting commercial viability of ESCO and energy efficiency investments. Next, the ESCO project investments need access to fiscal incentives. Take the case, I was developing a PPP transaction in Malaysia, and because the street lighting tariff was just so low, we needed viability gap funding for a private investor to get investment grade returns. So low tariff means that fiscal incentives are needed to offset or compensate the lack of commercial viability or attractiveness of certain energy efficiency or ESCO investments. Third, many ESCO markets have no equity and guarantee providers. And so, this is a severe lack in many markets. And then this is in more mature ESCO markets, you start to see this, but in the more nascent markets, they are non-existent. Next, Esco accreditation systems need to be strengthened. Some have removed, some have relaxed, some have put back in force. Accreditation, registration, or certification systems for energy service companies by the government, or some are being done by the ESCO associations themselves. So we need some discipline or regulatory framework where the rest of the customers can put their trust in, right? If there's an ESCO accreditation system, a credible system that would support the ESCO sector. Next is the ESCO sector needs to build capacities. Still, while ESCOs exist, there's a severe lack in trained and certified professionals, whether it's in measurement and verification protocol, whether it's in the conduct of investment grade or detailed energy audits, whether it's in negotiating performance contracts. Many of the ESCOs are lacking, and people, because of the shortage, people are just are turning camps and then joining other ESCOs in tighter labor or workforce markets. Lastly, government procurement and budgeting typically disallow ESCO contracts. So in some markets, not all, government agencies remain unable to award ESCO performance contracts or do multi-year contracting or be able to use savings without reverting it back to the Treasury. So it's all about mobilizing the $0.9 trillion through both on-balance sheet and off-balance sheet. And we say a third will be flowing to on-balance sheet. And we should continue to strengthen these channels, right? Whether it's the self-finance, the large corporates, or whether the banks will still roll out loans and leasing companies to still roll out lease finance. We should strengthen the right side of the screen, which is on-balance sheet finance, and strengthen the ESCO performance contracting market, strengthen the PPP, BOT, and joint venture, portfolio investments, and also the special market channels that I've listed in this page. So let's very quickly go through it. Self-financed, this is plain vanilla. Many large corporations are doing their energy efficiency retrofits by financing without getting an ESCO to finance. They procure technology, solutions, products, and services, and immediately it lands on their balance sheet as assets. The debt and lease finance come in two variants, at least two variants. The left-hand side of the screen, you see the guaranteed saving model, where the end user or the host entity is the borrower or lessee of EE loans from a financial institution. And this is typically how the US ESCO market grew. On the right-hand side of the screen, which we typically call the French model, we have the shared savings model, where the ESCO arranges finance and is now borrowing for energy efficiency from a bank and putting it on its balance sheet and sparing the end user from doing so. So this is very, very typical in emerging ESCO markets. Typically, it starts with the guaranteed savings model, and then it graduates towards the shared savings models when the financial markets are growing in maturity and have more sophisticated lending towards ESCO-friendly loans, right? And then what's emerging in many markets is the third-party investor, where a third-party investor owns the ESCO project assets. And it could be they will invest in a portfolio of 30, 40, 50 ESCO contracts across different project sites. Now, the third-party investor could either be a project company, a special purpose vehicle, an equity provider. It could be a government fund. It could be a super ESCO structure. It could be a state-owned enterprise, or it could be a private sector portfolio investor that's attracting both equity capital from corporate shareholders or debt finance from financial institutions. So this is the aggregation model that's emerging. And in the Philippines, Climergy was just launched 2 hours ago in the Philippines as an equity vehicle for ESCO contracts in this market. So how do we remove many of these ESCO market barriers? So the first recommendation here is to review and amend energy efficiency laws to capture more mandatory action from end users across more sizes and sectors. I think Malaysia still has the opportunity to tweak the energy efficiency law before it's passed. And Indonesia also has the opportunity to review while it's amending its decade-old energy conservation law. The next is to accelerate the phase out of subsidies, and this is a more painful task. It's the bullet that many governments will just have to bite. And in the meantime, while they are still in the process of phasing out, they should be able to mobilize some viability gap funding for energy efficiency projects. Next is to find ways to de-risk energy efficiency bank lending with risk-sharing facilities and guarantee mechanisms. When I was in IFC, I was doing this for a Japanese leasing company in Thailand, for example. So how do you get a leasing company to do Esco leasing in an ASEAN market. And you could do that by de-risking their portfolio exposure through guarantee mechanisms or risk-sharing facilities. The fourth would be to design, establish, or enable equity providers, the fund, the portfolio investor, or the Esco guarantee funds, whether it's public or private, to facilitate the entry of energy savings insurance products. You know, there's not much energy savings insurance products, and we have to source it from either North America or in Europe. And we need to aggregate that to lower the cost of insurance premiums for many ESCOs in the region. Fifth is to create or strengthen Esco accreditation, registration, or certification systems to bring them back where they no longer exist, to put discipline, to get a credible committee or agency or organization to make sure that the credibility of the accreditation system is upheld. Next is to intensify training and certification of individual professionals involved in the ESCO sectors. And this would include certified energy managers, certified measurement and verification professionals, and other ESCO professionals. The industries also need to develop industry standard contract templates for ESCO performance contract, whether it's guaranteed savings or shared savings, or whether it's chauffage, whether, you know, to the different variants of ESCO performance contracts. If you had standard templates in the market, it attracts more debt and equity capital. Next is government energy efficiency subsidies or tax incentives should be rolled out to ensure that there's improved equity returns. You know, many markets, with the exception of Singapore, most markets would need like 15% after-tax IRR, or improve debt service, or to de-risk long-term capital investments. So if you want to attract private capital, we've got to make sure that they are commercially attractive. And to do that, either we provide viability gap funding or guarantees or tax breaks, tax incentives. Lastly, we have to correct many procurement rules in some, not all, ASEAN governments to allow procurement and budgeting for ESCO performance contracts, for PPP transactions and JV agreements, to allow multi-year contracting, to allow government agencies to utilize savings to pay an ESCO or to procure EE technology solutions and services, so that the savings do not revert to the treasury of such agency. So these are the 8 recommendations to knocking down. Like I say, it may apply to some countries, but some countries have already succeeded in knocking down or removing the barriers. So just key takeaways before I hand it over back to Rosa. Southeast Asia will need to mobilize close to $1 trillion in energy efficiency capital through 2040 by removing barriers to innovative financial modalities. And next, a robust energy and efficiency and ESCO policy and incentive framework and strengthen ESCO industry can flow either debt, equity, and guarantees to propel ESCO market growth. Lastly, we need government to expand procurement and financing modalities, because this is really very effective in jumpstarting the ESCO industry. So I stop there, and if there's an opportunity later in the discussions, I'll be happy to answer your questions. So thank you all for your kind attention. Back to you, Rosa.
Thank you, Alexander, for those key messages that let us see the challenge for closing the energy efficiency capital gap if we are to meet the climate targets. It is definitely urgent that we be creative, as you say, and engage all the stakeholders, public and private. Now, in the interest of time, we are going to move on, but we look forward to having a deep discussion on this in the future with you. To our audience today, please feel free to join the discussion and use the chat box to send your questions. For our next segment, we'll be listening lessons learned from the field from Malaysia, China, Japan, and Thailand. And for this, we have a wonderful panel moderated by Mr. Septia Buntara. Mr. Buntara is the manager of the Renewable Energy and the Energy Efficiency Department at ACE. And on this note, I will happily hand it over to you, Septia.
Thank you very much, Rosa, for a gracious introductory section. Ladies and gentlemen, as mentioned by Rosa earlier, my name is Septia. I'm currently manager from the ASEAN Center of Energy, focusing on renewable energy and energy efficiency department. I'm very pleased to be your moderator today. We absolutely acknowledge ESCOs have played a fundamental role in shifting the status quo on energy efficiency, as we stated in our concept. And from the presentation of Alex, there's so much challenge is facing by ESCO's market right now. And of course, number of solutions were identified. But how we could cohesive enough to mitigate, address, and improve the situation. To find out more, now let's hear further from our lineup speakers here. I promise you it will be very interesting and you won't miss any valuable information from them. First, we have Dr. Soren Lutken. Dr. Lutken is a senior financial advisor at UNEP-DTU, where has worked on mitigation finance for more than 10 years. And he wrote several research, for example, on clean development mechanism, and he initiated a global ESCO network in 2019. Dr. Lutken will share about key learnings from the global ESCO network, and will also share a perspective related on his experience. Dr. Soren Lutken, I will provide you the 8 minutes for your sharing the perspective. Time is yours.
Thank you very much, Septia, and thank you very much for having us on board this very important webinar of today on ESCOs in ASEAN. Just let me share my screen. Here we go. So, as you say, Septia, I'm going to share the learnings from the Global ESCO Network, which is a relatively new organization. We were established in 2020. In fact, we started discussing the establishment of the Global ESCO Network back in 2019, and Alex will know because he was part of the small group of what we call the founding fathers of the Global ESCO Network back in 2019. But we really got it going in the beginning of 2020, and we've been expanding ever since, now having 29 partners all over the globe. As you can see here, we are, well, at least we can now call ourselves global. We are covering 80% of all ESCO associations because we're only organizing ESCO associations, not ESCOs directly. That is the job of the national ESCO associations. So we are partnering with ESCO associations throughout the world, and in the process, I believe that we're filling a gap or two. I will take not even a helicopter's perspective, but I think a satellite perspective here to cover the whole globe, as we are global. Many of the points that Alex has raised in his presentation in the beginning are in fact underscoring so the general points that I'm going to make. So Alex has provided the detail. I'm going to provide the overview. First of all, what we see with also as a basis for, in fact, founding the Global ESCO Network was the observation that ESCOs are generally not present on the global climate change agenda, even though energy efficiency as such has been the longest standing topic on climate change discussions back from the 1990s, where renewable energies were really not competitive, but where energy efficiency was even then termed as the first fuel, and already then also providing good returns on investment in emissions reduction. But the ESCO as such, the business model linked to energy efficiency, was not and still remains out of the focus or discussions in the climate change context. So that was what we wanted to change, to bring more concreteness into the energy efficiency agenda and discussions. The second gap we're trying to fill here is that there was no forum for ESCO associations exchanges among each other. We would very much like to provide that platform to allow ESCO associations across the globe to exchange experience from their national markets on all those regulatory barriers and challenges that Alex just lined out here in the beginning. And finally, as an add-on, we also found that ESCO literature seems to be scattered around, sometimes on the internet, sometimes off the internet, but it's definitely not easy to find a repository, a common repository of authoritative literature on ESCOs, which is why we have established such under the globalesconetwork.org. We are on our website, and I invite you all to look it up. I'm told that it's useful, so I hope you will share that view. So what are we learning in the Global ESCO Network? And we are still learning. I mean, we are a new organization, and we are still on a steep learning curve. One thing that is very obvious, I think, to everyone is that energy efficiency does not happen sufficiently quickly by itself, and needs regulatory intervention in order to reach those efficiency gains that we are hoping for. I know that the IEA will also later present the requirements on energy efficiency improvements in order to achieve the Paris Agreement objectives. We are not there. We are far from reaching those energy efficiency improvement levels that we need, and in order to reach that, we must depend on regulatory intervention. What we see, though, because of course regulatory interventions happen, but very often it in fact works counter to the involvement of ESCOs, and we see that maybe particularly in now also in recovery programs post COVID-19, and at least we've observed that both in the US and in Japan and Chile, where there is a particular exclusion of third-party financiers from support programs, which means in fact that those programs that government put in place directly disfavor the involvement of ESCOs. So that becomes an additional regulatory barrier, in fact, where we would like to see the inclusion of the ESCO industry actively as an implementation partner in those programs. Doing that would also bring about significant financial benefits. What we normally see governments doing when they're doing promoting energy efficiency is that they do isolated and program-based interventions. And in fact, what they do with those interventions, support programs for exchanging different types of equipment, is that they turn a generally profitable intervention into an expense for the government. So what could have been a profitable emissions reduction activity becomes a short-term, because it's expensive, and temporary, and maybe also very often shifting from focus to focus, temporary interventions that is not really creating a stable market that the ESCOs are requiring. Because ESCOs, as also Alex lined out here, is not one intervention or one piece of legislation or regulatory framework that is required. It is in fact an entire ecosystem that needs to be built in order to make the ESCOs thrive in a market. So there needs to be attention to the fact that this is strategic. When if you want the ESCO industry built as an essential element or the central element of energy efficiency policies, it is a long-term strategic effort. If this is acknowledged, it also very nicely links into the NDC processes, the nationally determined contributions processes under the Paris Agreement, that are also very long-term. So what we are proposing here is that energy efficiency should be a long-term strategic effort by governments in which the ESCOs are integrated. So what we're currently doing as part of our analytical work is we are currently analyzing all those regulatory barriers that Alex also lined out in the beginning. We do that analysis through dialogues with our network members, and we map not only existing barriers in regulation, but we also map barriers in non-existing regulation. And I know that sounds a bit odd. That's the regulation that does not exist, but which could be put in place in order to promote the ESCO and the ESCO business. Of course, that sounds a bit odd. Any business would like regulation that makes their intervention or their business compulsory. We know that from, I'm sure that when seat belts were introduced in cars, that was a bonanza for the seatbelt manufacturers. And of course, any business would want to have that kind of regulation in place. If governments are serious about their energy efficiency targets, they should in fact consider energy efficiency investments in exactly the same way as seatbelts were considered back in the 60s or 70s. If we want to achieve the energy efficiency gains, we must put in place regulation that promotes the ESCO business. And that is why we also analyze barriers in non-existing regulation. This is work that is ongoing. We hope we come out with a report on this, benchmarking barriers across different countries that we have been in dialogue with our ESCO associations throughout all over the planet in mapping out sometime in March next year. So I invite you to keep abreast of our activities on our globalesconetwork.org website, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Wow, thank you very much, Dr. Soren. There's so much useful information that we can extract from the presentation. And from your sharing, we noted that we need expansion of support for ESCO, support, for example, from regulatory aspect for ESCO, which require holistic ecosystem to improve in the future. That's a very useful information and a lot of aspects that we can further discuss. Don't worry for the participants. Dr. Soren will come back again for the next section. He will lead the discussion. Now let's move on to the next speaker. We have Mr. Zulkifli Zahari, the president of Malaysia Association of Energy Service Company, or MISCO. Mr. Zulkifli has 13 years of experience in the field, and he is the one who initiated many discussions related on ESCO, and is the founder of and managing director of Z Corporation and ESCO, which is part of a diversified Z group of company in Malaysia. Mr. Zulkifli will share to you observation from Malaysia's ESCO market in the public section, in public sector. This is a very important aspect to represent the situation in ASEAN, particularly in Malaysia. Mr. Zulkifli, I would like to provide you your 8 minutes to share your perspective. Time is yours, please.
Thank you. Okay, let me jump into my presentation. Hello, I'm Zulkifli. So I'm given this topic to discuss about the market in public sector in Malaysia. So The first thing I would like to talk about is the energy audit grants. This is introduced by the government under the 11th Malaysia Plan, and it's a 3-year program between 2016 and 2018. And what this entails is actually the understanding that one of the main barriers of doing ESCO businesses is actually doing the audit, which is seen to be a barrier. It's expensive. So this grant aims to provide some kind of subsidy, a matching grant, in order for the facilities that have high consumption to be subsidized in their audit. Yeah? In doing so also, it will also provide the opportunity for the facilities to understand what ESCOs do, aware about what how to compare themselves against other entities in terms of their baselines, and also understand about energy management, as well as to understand how to verify the savings and compare themselves with others along the way. So this grant actually is open to all, not just the industrial and commercial sector, also to the government. The government provided about 20 million or 4 million or 5 million ringgit dollars for this 3-year program. So those who have more than 100,000 kilowatt hour of consumption per month are eligible to apply. And the other conditions include that they have to be registered. The ESCO must be registered with the Energy Commission of Malaysia. Yeah, and also the audit must show that the savings can achieve at least 15% of saving over 3 years, and it must be completed within that period of time. And after that, it's up to the facilities to decide whether they want to carry out guaranteed saving or shared saving with the ESCOs involved. And as you can see, even the government, even though the government does not need to go through the audit process, but through this fund also, they have to lead by example by retrofitting the offices as well as their facilities in terms of lighting as well as air conditioning systems. And from this program, we can see that the total savings over the 3 years has exceeded more than 1 billion ringgit, which is more than almost 300 million US dollars in terms of energy costs overall. So in terms of government buildings, even though they are less significant, it's only 1%, but then it still provides the opening for ESCOs to offer the services to the government. So out of this success, the government has offered for the next period of Malaysia Plan, the 12th Malaysia Plan, a total of 20 million ringgit, 20 million USD, which is about 86 million Malaysian ringgit over a 5-year period. And this applies to the same concept too. But this time around, we have only one regulation that is focused on energy efficiency, which is called the REM, the AMIR, Efficient Management of Electrical Energy Regulation, which was enforced in 2008. And this entails any entity that uses 3 million kilowatt hour for a period of 6 months consecutively, they have to, they will be affected by this regulation. So with this amount, the idea is to get a better impact from the funding that is being arranged by the government. And of course, in general, the purpose of this is the most important thing is to create awareness, to get buy-in from all the energy users in understanding the audits, and to of course, provide the financial assistance that is required very much in these Escrow businesses, and understanding what it means by setting a baseline, and of course to implement the energy saving measures, and to ensure that the electrical energy achieved can be measured through an auditor report. And along the way, we develop the capacity building of the industry.
Sir,
Worth mentioning,
just to chip in to remind you about your 2 until 3 minutes time left.
yes,
Thank you.
yes, all right. We also had this BC project. Basically, it was mentioning because a lot of government projects have been done through this scheme, and many demonstration projects have been done through this project, which is involving UNDP and GAF, which is a 5-year project too. And we also have the government providing us what is termed as the EPC fund, which is about 50 million ringgit in total, of which ESCOs who wants to do projects can apply to this. Many hospitals as well as the government institutions use this fund in order to do the projects that this fund offers. And this fund, the specialty about this fund is it provides credit guarantee by the government under the subsidy called MDV, and as well as it also provides subsidized interest rates in order to lower borrowings. And up to now, for this year, 20 million is allocated for energy efficiency projects under this. The other thing that was mentioning is we have the National Energy Award for ESCO. Yeah, it started 4 years ago, and all the companies that wins these awards will be forwarded and submitted to the ASEAN level. And Malaysia did quite well for the first 3 years. Last year, not so well. But again, what is new in the past 2 years is that Malaysia has included a category called retrofitted building under EPC and non-EPC, which is still not available in ASEAN level. So I would like to propose that ASEAN also include this in the ASEAN Energy Award level. And these are some pictures of the winners, some free advertisement to our ESCOs. This is a polytechnic that won the first competition. This is the second one, which is the big university. And I think this slide is also quite important for us to know what are the current barriers and issues that need to overcome, at least in Malaysia. There is also some internal intergovernment bureaucracy sometimes that we need to overcome. For instance, the program might be by the Energy Ministry, but the facilities are being governed by another ministry like the Public Works. So in order for them to work and for the ESCOs to carry out, there must be some sensitivities in order to make sure that the bureaucracy is not compromised. Number 2, ESCO registration criteria with Energy Commission is not compatible with MESCO. We have different criteria. I think Malaysia has got one of the most energy ESCOs in the world because we have almost 250 ESCOs registered by the government, whereas MESCO has only 70 members because the Energy Commission only requires those who are registered as energy managers and some equipment in order to qualify as ESCOs. The next one, EPC template of government is still unresolved. So in order for us to actually do business with the government, we need to have a template, and that template, there are a lot of issues that are still pending. And of course, dedicated ESCOs for offering facilities to government facilities with existing and ongoing contracts with facility management concession companies is difficult to define the lines. So many facilities have got facilities management already. unless the facilities management company does the ESCO business themselves, dedicated ESCO will be difficult to actually look into offering their services. And finally, the government fiscal budget system is an obstacle for EPC, meaning to say the government only pays for the energy cost, but the benefits of the ESCOs that was brought about by the project, the mechanism for the saving payments is still not resolved. So with that, thank you very much for listening to my sharing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zulkifli. We received a lot of interesting information. For example, how valuable the estimated saving by pursuing the ESCO in Malaysia, including number of supports existing in Malaysia. We have received a question to you from our participants. Apologies, we might not pick all. One of the question is about, does the technology used need to be green certified in Malaysia to participate in the program that you mentioned? So would you like to share your sharing on this? Thank you.
This is one of the issues that is being raised in terms of the template too, because if you talk about the government template, they want to be the one who specifies the products, whereas ESCOs, they have their own product, they have their own specialty, and they guarantee it. So there is no way ESCO will take the risk to put products that are not able to perform over the period of the contract. So they are automatically required to make sure that the quality of the products are good, and they will have back-to-back warranty with the supplier of such products. So Malaysia does not have a proper body to say that what is green or not, but we have under the Green Tech Corporation a library to say that these are green products. Of course, they can be referred to, but it is not a requirement in EPC contracts at present. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you very much for your very detailed explanation, Mr. Zahari. I think it's answered the question. And thank you very much for your presentation again. Let's move on to the next speaker. We have Dr. Xianli Chu from Copenhagen Center on Energy Efficiency. Dr. Xianli holds a PhD in economics, and she is a senior economist at the Copenhagen Center on Energy Efficiency, which is the SEforALL Energy Efficiency Hub. She will share about China's regulation of energy-intensive industry and the role of ESCO. Dr. Xianli, I will provide you your 8 minutes to share your perspective. Time is yours.
Thanks a lot, Sepia, for the introduction. I will talk about the energy, for the intensive industry in ESCOs, China's regulation of energy-intensive industry and the role of ESCOs. First of all, in China, really the recent every day you can see China is now the world's biggest energy consumer and the biggest energy CO2 emitter for many years already, and it's still growing a lot. Industry sector is definitely a bigger role, play a bigger role behind China's energy consumption and CO2 emissions. You can see here in the year 2000, 70% of China's primary energy consumption is by the industry sector. Today is still, although the government made many policies try to decrease this, it's still 66%, especially more than half is from the manufacturing sector. That means really a lot of pressure how to reduce the energy consumption of the industries. China has adopted many policies in the process. One is regularly tightening energy intensity targets for key industries, for its bigger energy users, industrial energy users, for products and processes. For example, per kiloton of steel, how much energy is allowed to use. If you exceed the limit, you will feel fines, and also such new project will not be allowed for invested. So you can see for the Since 2006, the government have regularly set up such targets for the industrial sector, energy intensity targets, and also a lot of focus on the bigger energy users. First, they have the top 1,000 program, top 2,000 program, and all the large energy users. They have to have specific targets. They are monitored, have the results are shared. That's why the government sometimes have to even stop their energy supply. They have to stop production sometimes to fill such their local energy intensity targets. For the next 5 years till 2025, there's also a new target for the industrial sector as well as for the carbon intensity, 18%. Current status, China is one of the most successful in ESCO market development. It started in 1998 with the World Bank project, and today 59% of the global ESCO market is in China, and it have around 7,000 ESCOs in operation today. And you can see in terms of investment and energy, annual energy saving, most of them are concentrated in the industrial sector. And for the ESCOs, China has introduced many favorable policies. One is corporate VAT exemption reduction, and another is corporate income tax exception. So in the beginnings, first 3 years, total corporate income tax exemption, and the next 3 years is half of it. And also very clear accounting rules. By the end of the energy performance contract period, when the ESCOs transfer the equity is considered donations. So there's no tax, that in that accounting is very clear rules. And also what Alex already mentioned is access to finance. So how to liquidity, make their asset liquidity and get the funding turnover. So in China, it's like you can, ESCOs can use their assets, expected income as collateral to get bank loans, and also risk sharing to give financial guarantees for these ESCO EPC projects and the transaction platforms. So they can transfer, ESCOs can sell their EPC assets to others and get their funding back. And also encourage various green bonds, investment interest subsidies, as well as insurance for EPC transactions or projects. And for the next, the new policy trend is, as the ESCO market is expanding and so huge in China, the government is trying to phase out subsidies. Instead, it's used the very strict limits for enterprise energy use emissions in both of intensity and the absolute term to reduce their, so use the demand driven, and also encourages this major Chinese banks introduce such leasing and also financial windows to give loans for such energy efficiency projects. And also the Minister for Industry and Information Technology, they have many detailed rules, guidance on how to do ESCO EPCs. So one is like how you do the energy audit or energy saving diagnosis in key industries, and what are the technology catalogs. So make a very detailed rules or guidance on how to do this.
Dr. Xi, apologize to interrupt. You will have 2 minutes left. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Also, China, if you look at the China, it's also like a ESCO, this EPC projects. One problem is the dispute, how to measure it. China have very detailed rules and contract templates, over 200 rules and guidance on how you do everything in the process, including like equipment, how to do the monitoring, how to do the metering, calibration, all these very detailed rules to make it for different equipment, for different subsectors, to make it very clear, reduce the disputes and make it easier for the customer clients and ESCOs to determine how much the emission energy saving and what's the, so that makes it also a solid base for ESCO development. So also the rules and guidance also are in the process of ESCO development. The government also updating its rules. In the beginning, it's more like shared saving contract model. When this 2010, there's general technical rules for EPCs. Then it expanded so that I also include other business models, shared saving, guaranteed saving, and services. So all these are the government policies also expand over time. And you can see also the business models are changing. In the beginning, more shared saving and guaranteed saving. Today, the market is more diversified. All different kinds of BOTs, building own operator, all different models are in operation in China for ESCOs. I would like to also highlight in China this EMCA, that's the Chinese Esco Association, also played an important role because China has so many ESCOs. This EMCA has played collecting data, doing training. So it's also a very important role in this association. Sorry. So in China, you can see ESCO has developed in 3 decades, has become the biggest ESCO market. Its experience share very valuable reference for other countries, and also especially these supportive policies. And also China is pledged to peak its carbon emissions and energy, and also carbon neutrality. So these ambitious goals is a big basis for solid basis for further ESCO development. Thank you.
Oh, that's an excellent presentation and informative slide, Dr. Shi. And we noted how interestingly the involvement of the available support in enable energy saving incentive in reducing the EI, including to set standard for ESCO savings. Thank you very much, Dr. Xianli, for your informative presentation. Now let's move on to the next speaker. We have the president and head of President of Japan Association of Energy Service Company, or JASCO, Mr. Tetsuya Maekawa. He will share about revitalizing the ESCO market in Japan on NDC perspective. Mr. Maekawa, I will provide you your 8 minutes. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you see my screen?
Perfect.
Okay. So first of all, thank you very much for a chance to introduce Japanese situation of ESCOs in this important seminars. I have to talk about the revitalizing the ESCO market in Japan, essential roles from the NDC perspective. First of all, I have to confess that Japan's ESCO market is very small. Apart from China, Japan is included in this other part, and maybe the share is less than 2% in the world. And as for the proportion of the public sector and private sector, this is a customer of the ESCO. This is a source from the IEA. This portion of 39% comes from the public as a world base, and even in the United States, many of the ESCO customer is a public sector. And this graph shows the trend of the Japanese ESCO market since 1998. And maybe most of you do not think it is growing. Maybe it is not growing. And this is a share of the ESCO customers. Half of it is from the commercial sector, and almost 40% is from the industry sectors. And major part is basically ESP, we call it. This is a kind of the shared saving service of ESCO plus energy sales at the same time. Then I will talk about the history of Japan, of ESCOs. It is imported from the United States in the year of 1996, and there are various supportive measures from the government. And I will explain you. 3 ministries helped, supported ESCO so far. One is Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry. They have the law of energy efficiency, and they have revised the ordinance of this law. And the content is that there is an obligation for the large energy consuming facilities to study procuring ESCO service. But unfortunately, this is not the obligation. It is a kind of the obligation of effort. So not so many of the industry or customers do not think about this ordinance. Next one is from the Ministry of Environment. They have provided environmentally friendly procurement law. In this law, there is an article that governmental buildings shall procure ESCO service, but as a reality, there has never been applied for 13 years. I will explain you this later. And finally, Ministry of Land Infrastructure and Transportation provided operation manual for procurement of ESCO service for public buildings. But because there are no application of ESCOs for 13 years, this operation manuals has not been utilized for 13 years as well. So as for the central government, there are no procurement since 2007, but the local government has been a very big customer of ESCOs, including Tokyo, Osaka, Yokohama. They have provided a large market for ESCOs, but major projects have already been finished. And the next one is national universities and other independent governmental institutions. They have procured several projects of ESCOs a year. Based on this situation, we of the Japan Association of ESCOs had an internal discussion for ESCOs to grow. One is ESCO should be mentioned in nationally determined contribution of Japan along with other influential countries. Next one is buildings of central government should not refuse ESCO. We have started the discussion with government or with the Ministry of Environment about these issues. Next one is for our side. Japanese ESCOs have appealed pay from the saving too much. But in the era of carbon neutral, we should put much more stress on the performance guarantee. In other words, performance guarantee should represent ESCO's advantage. I will explain you this in the next slide.
Or just to interrupt, my son,
yes?
you have 2 minutes left for your presentation.
Okay. There are several characteristics of ESCOs: performance guarantee, and payment shall be levelized, and ESCO own the installed equipment or third-party finance or off-balance, and pay from the savings. And we have put stress too much on this number 4 characteristics. See this graph. This is a reduction guarantee. Maybe this is for the energy bill, reduction based on the bill. But in the year of carbon neutral, we think definition of ESCO should be like this. Reduction guarantee should be CO2 emission or energy consumption. In this context, we are now discussing with the Ministry of Environment that they should change the definition of ESCOs in their role of ESCOs. Thank you very much. And this is just an introduction of our association. We have 75 companies as our members. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much,
Mm-hmm.
Maekawa-san, for the very informative presentation and excellent perspective from you, despite the small market in Japan, but evolvement of ESCO and a lot of interesting part that we can see from update from you. That's very good information. Thank you so much, Maekawa-san. Lastly, go to Mr. Wisarut Maitasit, the Energy Regulation from Energy Regulation and Conservation Division, DED of Thailand. Mr. Wisarut always have a sharing perspective in ASEAN regarding evolvement of the ESCO in Thailand. He will share perspective on Thailand's strategy in promoting ESCO to scaling up the energy efficiency projects. The 8 minutes is yours, Mr. Wisarut. I'll give the floor to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Septier. Good afternoon from Thailand, everyone. Today, I would like to share some experience on how Thailand has been promoting ESCO to scale up energy efficiency in Thailand. Just to give you all some background about Thailand, we have a national energy efficiency plan as well as renewable energy plan, which we call them the alternative energy development plan. But on energy efficiency, Thailand has a target to reduce the energy intensity, which we define as the total final energy consumption divided by the GDP by 30% within the year 2037, addressing all sectors, in which so far we have managed to achieve around 8% in 2019. As for the renewable energy, we have a target to have 30% of the final energy consumption to be contributed by renewable energy by the year 2037. In 2019, we have achieved around 16% thanks to the rapid growth in solar. However, it should be noted that these numbers on these plans are currently being revised in response to our focus on climate change, which may result in a more ambitious target in the future. In 2020, as you all know, the world suffers from various challenges, primarily due to COVID-19 pandemic, resulting in economic slowdown on a global scale. However, it also presents to us the opportunity to disrupt the old ways with new technologies, such as the online meeting we are having right now, for example, or for business to innovate or implement new technologies in order to survive. As such, the Thai government has been formulating plans and measures to be implemented to make use of the opportunities to help mitigate the problems caused by the pandemic and the economic slowdown. The measures range from revising national energy plan, promoting digital transformation, and as Alexander has mentioned earlier, innovative market mechanism is also in play. And of course, ESCO, or energy service companies, will be playing an important role here as well. The Thai government, in fact, has been promoting ESCO in many ways for almost 2 decades now. In collaboration with the Federation of Thai Industry and Thai ESCO Association, we have been raising the awareness of the concept of energy service companies, such as by organizing a Thailand ESCO fair. So it's very big. Around 500 people have been attending, and make the ESCO more systematic by establishing Thai ESCO Association as well as the registration system for ESCO.
Sorry, Wisarut, to interrupt. You want to share? You want to put a next slide? I mean, it's kind of
the screen. Oh, it's not on the next slide right now.
Okay, yeah, just to remind. And you have 3 minutes until 4 minutes left for your presentation. Thank you.
Sorry, Septia. What screen are you seeing right now?
It's still on the first page.
Oh, really? Okay, just give me one moment. Okay. I think I was on this page. Can you see the page now?
Okay, perfect.
Okay. So yes, as I have mentioned earlier, so Thailand has been promoting ESCO for almost 2 decades. We have organized Thailand ESCO Fair. We have been making ESCO more systematic by establishing Thai ESCO Association, ESCO as a registration system. We have also sponsored activities such as capacity buildings, networking through executive forums and business matching for ESCO in many regions in Thailand, as well as we have tried to standardize the code of practice, the energy performance contract, investment grade audit, as well as the M&V methodologies to ensure that all registered ESCO operate under the same standards. We also provide ESCO with various financial incentives, ranging from tax incentive with the help of the Thailand's Board of Investment, or we just call them BOI in Thailand, in which the ESCO projects are eligible from tax exemption and other non-tax incentives. We also provide ESCO with a dedicated financial program called the ESCO Fund, which provides funding for venture capital of ESCO companies, equity investment, which we will go and invest around 5 to 50%, but no more than 50%, as well as equipment leasing, which ESCO may use to leverage on their EE project financing. Besides that, ESCO are also eligible for other financial schemes such as soft loan programs, subsidy programs, and more. And for the upcoming years, just like many other countries, we are going to go a step further by opening up a government sector as one of the future markets for ESCOs. The government buildings, as you may know, have a lot of energy saving potential, primarily because they have difficulties in changing to energy efficient equipment due to procurement rules or having to buy the cheapest equipment and the lack of funding. We believe that the shared savings schemes by ESCO may provide the government buildings with much needed funding and save on energy costs, which currently is at around 1.4 billion USD per year nationally. In order to do so, however, we need to solve the problems regarding the government procurement process and how the budget earmarked for utility may be used. We have been in discussion with related agencies in order to accommodate the way ESCO operates. At the same time, we are also trying to streamline the ESCO process so that when the public ESCO becomes feasible, it may be done with ease. And I think I'm running out of time, so that's it from me. Thank you very much for your attention. And of course, if you have any further questions, please feel free to send me an email at the email shown on the screen right now. Back to you, Septier.
Thank you. That's absolutely interesting. Absolutely interesting, Mr. How we see what is happening in Thailand regarding the support on ESCO, how we move further and take benefit by implementing ESCO. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, all speakers under my session today. For the next discussion will be led by Dr. Soren Lutken. We will see what can fit in the ASEAN context from our discussion, also perspective from the expert from the next section. I would like to hand over the floor to Dr. Soren for the interest of time. Dr. Soren, time is yours.
Thank you very much, Septia, again. And in the interest of time, I will move quickly. We have a panel of discussants for this last session, consisting of Ms. Cornelia Schenk from the International Energy Agency, as well as Mr. Jivan Acharya from the Asian Development Bank. We will start with Cornelia Schenk, who is an energy efficiency policy analyst at the IEA's Energy Efficiency for Emerging Economies team. She's been with the IEA for more than 10 years. She has 10 years of experience in international technical cooperation projects in Sub-Saharan Africa, the Caribbean and Southeast Asia, Before she joined the IEA, she worked as a sustainable energy specialist in the Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency and the Austrian Development Agency. She has a background in environmental technology and international affairs, as well as in international law and clean energy finance. Cornelia, I know you have a short presentation. Please share that.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, Søren, for the brief introduction. Allow me to share my screen, and I will try to run you through my presentation very briefly, because a lot of aspects have actually been mentioned already by other panelists, and I will refer to that if possible. Søren, give me a quick nod if you can see my screen, if that is fine. Technically perfect. Okay, so I wanted to start my input with a brief look at the role of emerging and developing economies in our clean energy transition. So it has become clear from our analysis that the world's energy and climate future increasingly hinges upon the decisions made in emerging and developing economies. Because as we are now, they make up 2/3 of the global population. They have typically low per capita emissions, but a vast potential for economic and energy demand growth, and also will be responsible for the bulk of emissions growth if we don't act. And when we look at the current investment levels and needs, there we can also see that there is a huge gap. So total energy investment globally is expected to be back up at $1.9 trillion globally, but emerging and developing economies are only accounting for 1/3 of the investment. If we look at clean energy investment, which is expected to be at $750 billion this year, then the picture is even more severe, with emerging and developing economies accounting for only 1/5 of the share. And also worth mentioning is that with the current levels of investment, we would have to double these levels to be on a transition that is compatible with a 2 degrees Celsius temperature rise. So overall, on a global level, we need to strengthen clean energy investments, and particularly focusing on emerging and developing economies. When we zoom in to those emerging and developing economies, we can see that clean energy investments have been hovering around $115 billion per year over the past years. We would need a massive surge in clean energy investment to put us on a pathway that is consistent with net zero emissions by 2050, an increase by above more than 7 times above $1 trillion is required to put us on the right track. And what will be necessary to ensure the affordability of clean energy transitions is also to keep financing costs low and improving the availability of capital. And although financing costs have come down in a lot of countries, the cost of capital is typically higher in emerging economies and developing economies. And Alex has also already alluded to the capital market gap in ASEAN countries and what will be required to move that. Our analysis mirrors that, saying that for the upscaling of clean energy investment, we do need a massive shift towards private capital. So about 70% of clean energy investments need to be financed by private sources, and off-balance sheet financing is becoming increasingly important, as Alex also has mentioned in his presentation, and we need a shift towards higher shares of debt financing. Now, when we look at energy efficiency investments globally, we can see a positive trend in 2021. So we have a 10% increase in energy investments in 2021 compared to the previous year, which is based on governmental recovery spending, stronger policies, and also an upward trend in economic activities overall. But it is by far not enough to put us on the net zero emissions pathway. So overall investment would need to triple by 2030 to put us on that pathway. It does show a market opportunity for ESCOs if the governmental policies are conducive to this development, as Søren also had mentioned in his presentation. But we need to substantially scale up our efforts. Right now, efficiency plays a prominent role in government clean energy and sustainable recovery spending. So over the next 3 years of announced spending plans, efficiency makes up 2/3 of total annual spending. So around $260 billion out of the total 400 billion that has been checked by our sustainable recovery tracker. However, we have to say that this is regionally unbalanced and rather concentrated in regions and countries which have strong governmental policies. When we look at the global ESCO market growth, we can see that in 2020, the market has been rather resilient and showed even some 6% growth in 2020, up to a level of $33 billion, which was already mentioned today. And the growth can be mostly attributed to positive market developments in China, which now accounts for a market share of 59%. In other markets, we see some upward trends, for instance, in the United Arab Emirates, Middle East, and a few other countries. But for most ESCO markets, 2020 has meant a stagnation or even a decline. And the market trends depend to a large degree on the governmental support and also on the sector involved in these developments. And what we also found from our annual ESCO market survey is that the COVID-19 pandemic and related crisis has not necessarily changed the market barriers and challenges for ESCOs, but in some areas exacerbated existing challenges. But we can also see that a lot of ESCOs have resorted to new and innovative solutions and to new ways of doing business. And this is another interesting trend that I wanted to share with you, is that digitalization is actually taking efficiency to new levels. We have seen in our market survey that a lot of ESCOs have resorted to more digital means, both in doing their own operations and running their own operations, but also in interacting with their clients in monitoring and reporting and verification, and that this has already improved business models and helped to stabilize businesses. We can overall see a trend that the stock of connected devices that can be used for enhanced control and automation in this year already surpassed the number of people on the planet and is expected to reach 9 billion by the end of this year. And this digital infrastructure can be used to accelerate energy efficiency implementation and expand the scope of energy efficiency beyond end users and towards wider system services, and can also provide new business opportunities for ESCOs. We can see here in the graph that there is a substantial increase of venture capital flows with early stage venture capital investments in digital efficiency startups of around $900 million in 2020, which is an increase of 20% compared to the previous year. And digital efficiency startups already make up almost 2/3 of all energy startups globally. So
Cornelia,
this is,
I am sorry to interrupt. Could you please make the final remarks? Thank you.
I wanted to actually finish on that note, just to mention that digitalization can be a very interesting trend and a good opportunity for ESCOs for the future. And that's my main points. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Cornelia, for this interesting overview. I would like to come back to you afterwards, just to also maybe give a comment on the previous interventions that we had in the first session, so to open the discussion also with our panelists. But before that, Mr. Jivan Nakaria from the Asian Development Bank also has a short intervention here as introduction to the discussion panel. Jivan Nakaria has been with the Asian Development Bank for more than 15 years and is currently working in the energy division of South Asia as a principal energy specialist. He's currently focused on the developing and implementing energy efficiency, renewable energy, and other broader energy sector projects in India and Nepal. But he's also serving as a focal point for regional cooperation and integration for energy in South Asia. Jivan, please share with us your introductory remarks to this panel. You are muted, Kifi.
Okay. Yeah, good. So first of all, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to this very important webinar. Because Alex has already put forward what are the issues and barriers and why it is so important for the region, whether it's a Southeast Asia or ASEAN region or for the rest of the other regions in Asia Pacific and also outside. Also we also heard from Cornelia about some of the real numbers from IEA. But what I wanted to mention here is that I'll be very brief and just wanted to mention that there are two important actions that have taken place in 1.5 months in ADB. And that's what I wanted to, kind of highlight it here. One is that our new energy policy has been approved in October this year. And the good news is that there is so much of focus on this clean energy, especially on this energy efficiency. So this is a very, very important part of it in terms of what kind of the feedback that we received from our stakeholders within ADB and also with the governments and also the private sector and others. So that was something that I wanted to mention, that we are fully on board to get this moving, and then we'll improve our activities and actions on that one even further. And then these actions on our energy policy focuses on, of course, on the promotion of renewable energy, and greater focus is also on the demand side of energy efficiency. And also helping on the capacity building on the policy side of it, regulatory aspect of it, and also of course the financing of our investments, of course, which is being a bank, which is also very, very important part of it. The other highlight that I wanted to mention here is that our ADB has also increased or enhanced our investment for $100 billion up to 2030. So this is the real number that we ourselves will also be tracking, and also the rest of the other stakeholders will also be tracking in terms of how well we are doing in making these resources available for this area. This is broadly for all the climate change aspect of it, but nevertheless, most of it will go for mitigation. Of course, there is also focus on the adaptation. But these two numbers to me are very, very important to express our ADB's support and commitment for these areas. And we have done lots of projects in various countries in promoting renewable energy and energy efficiency. And then, in fact, in your introduction, you mentioned about this Energy Efficiency Services Limited project that we did is under implementation now in India, which is also serving as a kind of a super ESCO, where it's owned by the government, and then if it is owned by the government, then they will have a possibility of accessing funds, and then also these other agencies who are actually implementing the distribution companies and others will have a much greater comfort in utilizing these resources for either for energy efficient bulbs or street lights, and also they are going for smart meters and distributed energy and so on and so forth. So what I see is that from ADB side, we are, let me reiterate that we are very interested and we are very committed in providing our support to our developing member countries in ASEAN and then also in others. And then the range of our support and assistance varies, and depending on the countries, whatever they need and want, and we can add value, and then we'll always be available to provide that support. And then some of these, again, these barriers that Alex also mentioned at the beginning, especially on the regulatory side of it, the targets and also leveling, and also providing some kind of innovative financing are something which is very close to our heart, and then we'll also be doing it in moving this one forward. So with a very short introduction, let me stop it here, and then what is important is to, if there's any questions that you'll be looking for from ADB side, we'll be happy to do that one as well. So let me stop it here. Soren, back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for this overview and for introducing also ADB's increasing involvement in energy efficiency. I would like to open the floor both to you, Stephen, and Cornelia, to maybe raise questions to our panelists from the former panel on how, well, the subject, the central subject of the webinar today. How do we promote ESCOs and their role in ASEAN countries to improve energy efficiency investments more generally? Is that a question that both you, Cornelia, and Johan would like to answer, try to answer, or maybe put forward also to our panelists for a general discussion on how do we move forward with a general ESCO agenda in ASEAN countries?
I can give a brief start with a few takeaways from our analysis, and then I would be happy to hand over to other panelists to chip in to that and to elaborate more with their country experience and regional experience. But what we have seen from our analysis is that clear targets, governmental policies that are long-term and that are strategic, and ecosystem support from governments are very important to provide a signal both to consumers and also incentivize energy efficiency investment. So what Jianli Xu mentioned for the Chinese ESCO market is one example of long-term strategic support that worked very well in building up the market over time. We also see that the involvement of public sector institutions and also financing institutions, be it from the development finance side, climate finance side, but also at a later stage, commercial financing institutions chipping into the picture, is very important to leverage and unlock private ESCO and capital mobilization. Sometimes this requires capacity building on all fronts. So this is one of the accompanying measures that I mentioned before for the evolving ecosystem that are required. Another important point is reducing transaction costs, which was mentioned also by other presenters in finding standardization of contractual arrangements, possibly of financing models and financing protocols, but also monitoring, reporting, and verification. And I would say there are a number of different ESCO market models that have been applied in different countries. I would not want to give a recommendation for one model over the other, but I would say that it is very important that we keep analyzing why these models work in which markets, what are the success factors, and to keep enforcing a experience exchange between those actors that were directly involved in this development. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Cornelia.
Yeah, yes, let me also add a few things there. See, when I started working in the operations, And then I always wanted to see how can we move this agenda forward, and an institution like ADB, how can we make a difference? But when I started talking to the stakeholders and our also government clients and also some of these ESCOs as well, the biggest problem I see, I mean, again, it varies from country to country and region to region, from subsector to subsector. There is because unless and until there is a very strong regulatory requirement from the governments to implement these energy efficiency measures, it still remains a kind of a voluntary practice and activities for these countries, for these institutions. So to me, that is the kind of a starting point, having a countries to put up a very, very strong and very strong, ambitious kind of a target and requirements for the equipment manufacturers, to the industries, to the commercials, and all other, let's say, end user consumers, so that they will be kind of forced to use this more efficient equipment. And and that will create the demand where ESCOs can come in and offer their technology and their support and services to these clients to make it happen. Now these countries are coming forward with those targets and then regulatory requirements, but either that is not good enough or they are not effectively implemented. So, and unless and until these things are not really enforced, so then ESCOs will not be able to find that their market to implement that. When they are there, they have the technology, they have the knowledge, and some of them will have also the access to financing. But because that market is not there, they are not being able to move as fast. So that's to me is a number one. And I think after that, then the ESCOs will come. Then the financial institution, whether it's a local or outsiders and international like us, will be able to find ways and means to make it happen. That's one. The second thing is also the credibility of these energy service companies are also very, very important, because we see a large number of ESCOs. Some are really, really good. Some are still struggling on their own. So then when you reach to a client, then why would they trust a particular ESCO? So I think that's where, development organization like all of us should be able to enhance or increase the confidence of these clients to go for those ESCOs to be able to do that, because they will be signing a kind of a long-term contracts for this energy saving, and then this payment and all those kind of things will be tied to that one. So this confidence level is, to me, is also very important. And this is where in India, as I mentioned earlier, we started with the government kind of a super ESCO, because the confidence level will be much higher because they know that it's a government one. But that will not solve all the problem, and then we really, really need the private sector to get into in this space. Financing, especially on the innovative financing, remains a challenge. And then for us, we will not be able to go and finance individual ESCOs because their amount of money that they would need may be small. So then we'll have to go through another aggregator or a local financial institution to be able to do that one. And there are some these local banks who will be able to consolidate, aggregate those requirements, and then they will be able to pass that one. So I think, these are some of the things that, I just wanted to supplement to what Cornelia has mentioned there. Let me stop it here. There are a few things, but I think maybe others can chime in as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeevan. If I may just add my own observation here before I open the floor to the panelists from the former panel. I think what you are mentioning here, Jeevan, is the mandatory implementation. I mean, as we see, mostly these energy efficiency targets are aspirational, but there's not really a government commitment behind them, in the sense that they are willing to put demands on industry or building owners. Or it remains first and foremost aspirational. I think that is one important point that needs to change. But I also think it's important that, as we also discussed throughout the panel, there are a number of elements that need to be right, and it's not enough that only one of them is right. You need to have all of the elements in place before this ESCO ship is sailing. And I think there is not sufficient understanding of that among policymakers, that they need to commit to the entire package. And maybe we need to be better at making clear what is the entire package that they need to buy into in order to get this market going for real. With that, I would like to open the floor to our panelists from the forum panel for comments to what has been presented here in this last session. Anyone volunteering?
Yeah.
Otherwise, I will ask. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Yes. I mentioned in my presentation just now that we have a single regulation called the EMIR in order to regulate energy efficiency. That has been done for 12 years. But the truth of the matter is enforcing it is very difficult. Up to now, after 12 years, only 60% compliance. And why is that so? I think one of the key issues remain is capacity building is still lacking. There's still not enough expertise in terms of numbers. I mean, energy efficiency is something that has to have the participation on a very big scale as against renewable energy. So we need to look into capacity building. In order for capacity building to take place, there's also needs to be a buy-in in understanding what energy efficiency is all about by both the public and private sector. In many big events that we see, most of the time when we talk about energy, trying to get everybody's national determined contribution, we always talk about renewable energy, very little about energy efficiency. That is because there's lack of understanding about energy efficiency. And Malaysia is about to have a new act next year, which is called the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act, a proper act which covers thermal. Right now, we don't have enough thermal energy managers. We are only starting to work with Japan to train the trainers, and of course, Esco also starting. And this law will not be effective as well if we do not have enough capacity. So one of the things that I would like to promote is further collaboration in order to capacity build amongst ourselves, exchange expertise amongst ourselves, and I think the governments have got a big role in order to make sure that awareness and the buy-in into energy efficiency is accepted in a larger scale, especially the industry. Governments also know that they have to lead by examples. Every government needs to lead by example. And the simple objective is if you have a big facility, if you have a big ministry, you need to save energy. And you need to facilitate the EPC form of model. You must be able to talk to the stakeholders like MySchool and so on. How can it be eased off? Because it's no more traditionally that the money comes from you. It is us who's investing. Yet they may want us to do performance bond and things like that, which is something that's added to our burden of financial constraints already to fund the project. ESCOs bring capital and expertise in order to come up with a turnkey solution, and at the same time, Malaysia can meet its national determined contribution, which is 45% unconditional. And I think we're still very far from that. So I think that is my take on what we should do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sue. And I can see Alex is also.
Yes.
Yeah, Alex, please.
Yes, thanks, Saren. And I'd like to build on Zahari's statement that we need to work together as a region, and maybe beyond Southeast Asia and involved. And I'm very happy that there are two APIA members here, Esco and Esco, supporting this webinar. But this is exactly it. It's collaboration. From one country, there's certain expertise on financing. There's some expertise from measurement and verification. There's some expertise on whacking the big stick and dangling big carrots as far as government policy is concerned. So if we combine this know-how in a regional platform in a more collaborative way, through, let's say, ASEAN Center for Energy, IEA being a catalyst for that, APIA being the platform, we could accelerate the market and policy reforms across the region. So there's really value in broadening, and I would say even beyond Southeast Asia, and embrace the needs of the rest of Asia Pacific, like Japan, Korea, even China and India. And if we work together, we could accelerate each other's market transformation, and especially enabling and as ESCO markets capital flows, enabling policies, enabling market conditions. Thank you, Soren.
Thank you very much, Alex. Anybody else from the panel wants to come in here? It seems not. I have one question from one of our participants asking, in the question between renewable energy and energy efficiency, and which one should we prioritize to curb carbon emissions, and why? I mean, I think that is also what has been mentioned here by several panelists. It seems to be easy to finance renewable energy, but when it comes to energy efficiency, it immediately becomes difficult. Any comments on that question?
Sorry, if I'm chiming in again, but I'd like to make a comment. I'm starting to grow and gather evidence right now that in many markets, many Southeast Asian markets, the capital requirement for energy efficiency is more than double that of renewable energy. And while private capital is already moving at a steady velocity towards renewable energy, there's very little private capital flow in energy efficiency. So I think that we really need government, private sector, civil society, and development players really working together to solve that impasse where energy efficiency capital flows, which is more than double that of renewable energy for any market, whether it's a developed or emerging market.
Thanks, Alex. And if I may offer my 2 cents here also, one of the reasons why one of the observations, the first observations by the Global Escrow Network was when we were established, was that the problem with energy efficiency is the fragmentation of technology. And there's hundreds, if not thousands, of different technologies, which makes it very, very difficult to make a uniform approach. As you can do with solar energy or wind energy, that is immediately conceivable what we're talking about. But energy efficiency is a blurred picture, and I'm sure also from a financing perspective, G1 would agree to that. Which is why we think that the ESCO is in fact the answer. We're not looking at the technology here, but at the intervention model instead, and we try to market that, in fact, in climate change context, as this is the energy efficiency technology. The technology is, in fact, the implementation model and not the underlying nuts and bolts that go into the actual projects. We are really getting to an end here. I don't know, G1, if you want to come in with a final comment on that, then I will wrap up this final session here and hand back the mic to our organizers.
Right. No, I just wanted to mention that, I want everybody to leave this webinar with a message that energy efficiency is important. It is the lowest hanging fruit available from the cost point of view, from the cost per ton of CO2 reduction, from the payback period point of view. It is the lowest hanging fruit, but it has been there for a very, very long time. Some say it's now becoming like a rotten fruit because it has been there, but we have not been able to reap the benefits of this one. So it should not be energy efficiency is the first thing that all of us should do. But then that alone is not sufficient, and we know what the barriers are. So that's why we need to go for renewables. And again, within renewables, also there are various technologies. And then maybe on top of that, there are so many other things to do. But energy efficiency should always remain the first thing that you should look at. And then if that doesn't meet, then you move to the next one and next one, because the cost per moving forward there. And I also would like to really thank everybody here, because this should be a kind of a joint effort from the government, from the private sector, financial institutions, research organizations, and all other stakeholders. All of us should continue working together and move this agenda forward. And we really don't have a choice, but we really have to work together. We are working, and I think we should continue doing it, and then maybe be able to. Then we all will benefit out of it. And once again, we would like to thank the organizers for this event from my side as well. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you, Jiwan, and thank you also, Cornelia. I would like to hand back the floor to Rosa for the final remarks.
Thank you so much, Søren. Jiwan and Cornelia, that was a great way to capitalize on the experience, and I am sure that this will inspire countries in the region to develop ESCOs. Now we have arrived to the end of this webinar, and for this I would like to invite my colleague Alvin Jose, Principal Energy Specialist with SEforALL, to deliver the closing remarks and wrap up this session. Alvin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rosa. Good morning to everyone from snowy Vienna. And it is going to be a close of the business day in Asia, so I won't keep everyone too long. First of all, I would like to thank everyone for participating. Apologies for going a bit over the time, but all worth it, because this was very good and rich information being shared and discussions. From the SEforALL side, I would like to thank all the presenters, the speakers, moderators for participating in this event. I would like to make a special mention to ASEAN Center for Energy for collaborating with us on this. This is not going to be the first or the last. This is going to be a series of events. The message is very clear. The energy efficiency market in the region is, as Alexander says, close to $1 trillion US opportunity. Now, how the ESCOs can actually fill this opportunity is the big questions, and how we can actually now create a market for more ESCO participation is the bigger question. And I think, at least from the SEforALL side, we would like to keep this conversation ongoing. The intention for this webinar was to showcase some of the best practices. We saw how Malaysia has been doing their efforts, China through its regulatory policies, Thailand through its Esco network, and we saw how Jivan from ADB mentioned about how India is creating the super Esco market. So we have different lessons learned from the regions that we have been shared, and hopefully we can now continue this conversation sometime next year to see what are the latest updates that we can see. I really liked what Alexander mentioned about looking at markets beyond Asia and see how the lessons learned from outside Asia can be now used in the region as well. So with that, I would like to close this webinar. Thank you very much once again for participating, and we'll see you soon. Till then, be safe and have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and see you next year.